Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Daily Objective. And today is a very special day, as you can tell by my excitement. We're anticipating a debate starting in an hour from now between two of Nikos Sotirakopoulos' mentors, two of his teachers, really the battle of the two senseis. Nikos's PhD supervisor is about to go up against Yaron Brook, who, of course, was arguably a key figure in converting Nikos from a diehard, bloodthirsty communist into a gentle and wonderful objectivist. There's one way to explain the situation. We'll find out if I'm being a little bit on the dramatic side or not. But I will say, there's a lot of people out there talking about the left and the woke left and how do we defeat the left? And I find it much more interesting to see kind of a debate between anti-woke people to see what are the different perspectives on how to deal with this phenomenon, as opposed to just, woke versus non-woke. That debate is, who cares? I mean, it's been raging for years. No, for decades. We got a lot to talk about in anticipation of this debate. So let's welcome the man whose future depends on this debate, the man whose intellectual future, his entire life will be determined by who wins this debate, Nikos Sotirakopoulos.
Thanks, Rucka. So I'm more and more impatient, by the way, with the term woke. I think it's become part of the culture wars itself in a non-helpful way. But it's used in the title because people understand what it's about. They understand what it represents. So one part of what I'm interested in the discussion is what's going to be Yaron's take. So is it going to be let's say, the traditional objectivist line that we have to take the long fight through the culture and change the main premises? Or so when he has to concretize, how do you fight this, what I call this culture of decline, basically, and this closeness of the public sphere, a public sphere where debate is not anymore possible, and things that used to be considered obvious and non-controversial today are considered controversial. And an obvious example is, for example, can a man give birth? Now, why it's interesting, the discussion with Frank Furedi. So Frank has been in hot waters, forever, but lately, because he has been criticized of being way too tolerant of the government of Hungary. So the government of Hungary has taken some steps towards making this, quote, fight against wokeness into legislation. And Frank's take has been, look, what this country is doing is what every country is doing, which is says, look, these are our principles, these are the things we believe in, and the things that we believe in should be on let's say, the official documents that say a man or a woman, rather than birthing person one or birthing person two. So that's, let's say, that was the idea for the debate. Plus, Frank has recently been to Hungary. It's where he's from, actually. And he went to the European Championship game. And before the game, there was almost a protest. So the people who were going to the stadium, at the same time, they were protesting the taking the knee stand. And he considered it something which is thrilling and something which he considered it something worth of celebration. So we all know that something needs to be done about this asphyxiating, I don't know, it's a Greek word, so I can call it however I want, this asphyxiating culture. But then when it comes to the specific, what is to be done, that's a big question. And quite often you see people, particularly conservative culture wars, who say, oh, you know very well to theorize and to argue, while institution after institution become more and more indoctrinated by a particular ideology. So the time of the debate is out. Now is the time for action. And I can understand this is very, very appealing. So, for example, when you see someone complaining on Twitter and someone quote tweeting him and say, okay, what are you going to do about it? That's a question which puts you in a space to think, oh, okay, yeah, what am I going to do about it? So that's how I see the interest in such a discussion.
Yeah, I mean, when I was thinking about how what this debate is actually going to be, I was thinking they're going to debate like which ideas to counter the woke people with. So the sort of go-to has often been like counter, let's say if the feminists are saying there's a wage gap, then people counter by saying, no, there's actually laws against the wage gap. So there is no wage gap, if you control for these factors. And of course, there's a much different argument that I would say you need to make. First of all, we need to privatize wages. We need to privatize, leave it up to private contracts, what people get paid. And, that's obviously a big part of it. I mean, that's a serious thing, but, more fundamentally, we need to get to individualism. We need to promote something positive, individualism, reason, enlightenment, values. And that's what I'm expecting to see Yaron Brook say in this debate, that he's going to be saying we need to kind of do away, like we need to challenge wokeness in its fundamentals, in the way that it groups people together, in the way that it encourages people to believe that they can't really think independently, they encourage people to think that they've been conditioned by society according to their group, whether it's race, sexual preference, gender, etc. So that's what I'm expecting to see.
So what's your definition, by the way, of wokeness? Because it's something that is very rarely defined. So for example, how would you distinguish wokeness from something like, I don't know, cancel culture or SJW? So how do you understand the term wokeness?
I think they're the same thing, basically. I think woke is, it's basically ebonics. It sounds like something that came from the hood, from like hip hop culture or something. And it won't be long. There's my prediction. I don't know when this will happen, but at some point people are going to say, stop saying the word woke unless you're Black. It's slang that you're appropriating from Black culture. That's my prediction. So the use of the word woke is kind of silly. It's like a bunch of white guys walking around with caps pointed diagonally and going, what's up, what's up? It's silly to use the word woke so much. I'm surprised it's gone on this long without being canceled. I don't think it's any different. Woke basically means like you're awake, like you're paying attention to what's actually happening. You're not asleep like all the little people that don't notice what the system in place. They don't realize that they're being oppressed and that there's a giant system in place of oppression, a net, like multiple levels of oppression going on. If you're woke, you're awake. That's how I define that. That's what I assume it means.
So in a way, it's like the red pill of the other side. So the idea of the red pill is that now you got the prism, now you got the filter, now you got the ability to see things as they really are rather than as what they appear. So let's say someone who would self-identify as quote woke, because I assume it became as a positive term. The idea is I can see things that you people cannot see, which is open to debate. I mean, there could be a value to that. The problem is that when this becomes almost an orthodoxy, an unquestionable orthodoxy. So for me, when I say that person is quote woke, it means not only that they have a prism, let's say, to some injustices that might even be real, but that this prism now becomes central in their identity and is not to be questioned. That's the most important thing, is not to be questioned, and questioning it actually puts you on a moral, let's say, category, which is to be condemned.
The difference between the red pill men's rights, right wingers, whatever you call them, however you group them, versus the woke left is a superficial difference. As you can see, it's just different forms of red pill, but when the red pill people, I think they tend to they veer towards sort of a biological determinism or biologically shaping of us, which is, of course, there's a kernel of truth to that. We are biological beings, and a lot of our motivations probably can be traced back to our biological needs and intentions to mate or something like that. But they're only a kernel of truth because that it does not control for philosophy and chosen values. And then on the left, or the other side of this dichotomy, you've got the woke left, the intersectional feminists, the social justice warriors. They're saying you're conditioned completely. You're basically you're conditioned from birth to see yourself a certain way. Let's say you're Black, you're conditioned to see yourself a certain way. You basically play a role in your own oppression by society. You contribute to it unless you wake up, unless you're woke. And to them, it's all environment 100%. So again, there's a kernel of truth there. The environment, aka culture, aka philosophy, plays a role, but we need to identify philosophy. And it's not just the kind of random happenstance of your environment. It's specifically the ideas that we're exposed to that we end up sort of choosing and accepting. So they're superficially enemies. So I when I was thinking about this upcoming debate earlier, I was thinking to myself, like, you don't even need to go back many decades to see how a superficial opposition to the left leads nowhere. You don't need to go back to the 60s or the 70s. You can look back to the last 5 years. There was this social justice explosion of people on the internet. I think Tumblr, the website, was a large kind of breeding ground for these thinkers, and YouTube videos definitely were about. And then an enormous opposition to it on YouTube and elsewhere. People responding to the social justice warriors saying, you guys are crazy. What do you mean? You guys are absolutely insane. Just treat everyone like an individual. What are you making such a big deal about race and gender for and all that? Like, kind of a common sense, so to speak, response to the social justice left. And here we are just a few short years later, everyone who was part of that anti-social justice, so anyone who is a reactionary to the social justice warriors, has either just become a card-carrying Republican, or they've basically joined the woke left. They've ended up admitting, hey, you know what? The social justice left, we're onto something. That's basically virtually everyone who was part of that whole anti-social justice scene. They've all pretty much, either they've become Republicans or they've become they kind of joined the left and admitted that they were wrong. And then there's maybe a fraction of people, a small number of people that are still insisting, oh, we need to be centrist. We're centrist, stay in the center. But like, that doesn't mean anything. And very few people are inspired to join them. And so we don't need to go back to the 60s and 70s to see how the opposition to the left, when it's superficial, ends up either becoming the left or the mundane kind of milquetoast Republican Party. We could just see it in the last few years. So this, I think, is an opportunity to mention Ayn Rand's objectivism is a radical and fundamental response to the woke left, and it offers an alternative that is meaningful, that is actually individualistic, and it's, again, radical. And it addresses the fundamentals.
By the way, don't you think that someone maybe should write a book about the culture wars and where they come from ideologically?
Yeah, I was thinking you should write a book like that. Have you thought of doing that? Wait, didn't you? Does it come out today? Is it out now? Yeah, it looks like Identity, Politics, and Tribalism, The New Culture Wars by Nikos Satirakopoulos.
So it's out today, people. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it on paperback and on Kindle. The price is very, very reasonable. And we spoke about Frank Furedi. He's one of the people who has endorsed it. The other one is Greg Salmieri. So here's some appeal to authority, and also Joanna Williams. So I'm so thankful to these people. So basically, much of the stuff that we've been discussing here is covered in the book: the history of tribalism, how left-wing ideas can give rise to tribalism, where does the tribalism of the right come from, and then there are 3 case studies: free speech, race, and gender, on how this, it's in a way, it's like, how do you call this relationship where both parties are bad and they make each other worse while they're in this tango, like codependent or something like that. And then there's a conclusion where there is some positive message and a positive alternative. So what do I mean when I say that they make each other worse? Now, this is not to be considered that I stand in the middle and say both sides are equally bad. My take is, I believe that the left has the biggest role in the culture wars because of its dominance in the cultural institutions. Having said that, listen what the right has become of. So here we have Turning Point UK. Again, they want to portray themselves as, let's say, the other pole of the SJWs. Here's one of their tweets last week, quote, so they've been against the English team taking the knee in the European Championship. If you insult the English people, you should not be allowed to represent us. Now, let me read this again. And there's a picture of Hurricane taking the knee. If you insult the English people, you should not be allowed to represent us. And my comment to this is, these people are SJWs of the right. You should not be allowed to represent us. By whom? By you, turning UK people. Like, do you want to be the new council commissars in the place of the current council commissar? So now you get cancelled if you say, well, only women can give birth. Now you want people to not be able to represent their country because they take the knee. So what you have is someone seeing at the other side saying, okay, how bad are these people? Can I become anywhere close to how bad they are? And it's really, really depressing. But at the same time, again, what's the alternative? Because people are going to say, okay, at least these people are doing something. By the way, this was also always the creed in the radical left when it came, for example, to urban guerrillas or people who would go to extra legal activities like wild strikes and stuff. At least they're doing something. So, Rucka, when someone says, yeah, at least Turning Point UK is doing something, or when they say, well, Eastern European governments that defend their values via legislation, that me and you would say that this legislation is could be infringing individual rights, at least they're doing something. So what would be your answer to the at least they're doing something?
They're doing the wrong thing. I mean, there's the right thing to do, and then there's everything else. So the only time I want to hear this lesser of two evils talk is on election day. If someone thinks, let's say they say voting against the left, so voting for the lesser of the two leftist parties is a good way to buy time. I'm skeptical that that's even a good policy, but I can hear that argument. But other than how to vote to buy time, I would say aligning yourself with the right, joining the big tent, I think is a losing strategy. And honestly, even voting one way or another doesn't seem to be very effective. And as we see, oftentimes when Democrats, I'm using the American parties here as in the example, when Democrats win, they often, they don't actually accomplish very much when they have like Republicans there to counter them, versus when Republicans win, they basically, now we've got a bunch of big government people in power, and the so-called party of free markets are basically moving us away from free markets. So I'm not even sure that voting against the left even really is effective. But certainly, other than voting, there's no reason to go anywhere near Turning Point UK, USA, Turning Point period. They are pathetic. They are milquetoast. They pick up everything that the left discards. Now Turning Point wants to be seen as the inclusive party because, you know, the left is alienating various people by identity, and Turning Point is saying, hey, no matter what your identity is, you can come here and join our political movement. I mean, let them do whatever they want. They're only going to embarrass themselves in the upcoming years. Let's just focus on what's positive. I mean, how do you live your life? You know, you just focus on your own career, your own pursuits. That should be the philosophical battle. Objectivists who really agree with objectivism, I think you should just promote objectivism and spend a little bit of time on polemics to kind of show why these guys over here are wrong, but mostly just accentuate the positive. That's what I believe at this point. There's really not much that comes of aligning yourself with any group or any party. And when I guess, yeah, what you're asking about, what do you think of the proposition that at least Turning Point is doing something? Again, they're doing the wrong thing. And when has this ever resulted in anything positive? Looking again through history, when has the opposition to the left in its misguided ways ever really resulted in anything positive? Do you see it that it has?
No, I can't see it, but I think the question is valid. That's what is to be done. So one thing that needs to be done, I think, is also to understand how bad things are and have plan B. So, for example, if your career is related somehow to these people who are becoming more and more drunk in their power, then I think you should start having in your mind a plan B. So I saw Claire Lehman, the editor of Quillette, post some tweets the other day that were really creeped me out. She said that there was a coordinated campaign against employers or family members of people who just liked one of your tweets and things like that. So it seemed to be that there were some professional, let's say, Twitter mobsters who would say, okay, and go and find that person and let's see who are their family members and tell them, do you know that that this person liked that tweet by this very problematic person? So the one thing should be have a plan B. The other thing would be don't shy from the fight, I would say. And this would sound contradictory with the first. So let's say someone will go to my employer and say, oh, Nikos is having debates with Yaron Brook, who said that Islam is not the religion of peace, and Frank Furedi, who says that it's okay to ban a gay wedding. He hasn't said that, but you know, they're going to make a caricature. And then I'm going to say, oh, really? So it's on my LinkedIn profile, it's on my cover letter, and almost every day I talk about these things. So are you surprised? And if my employer has any problem, let me know. And yeah, whatever, goodbye, or let's figure it out. But thinking that you can shy away from the fight, I think that's a losing strategy. So what should be done? What should be done is you should shout from the rooftops without going out of your way. But I mean, when you see an injustice, or when it is your job to see an injustice, you should make it clear that you're not gonna be afraid of the mob. And the second thing is keep in mind that this might get worse. So maybe a plan B is not necessarily a bad thing.
Mm-hmm. Read some super chats.
Yes.
Marilyn with $2 says, cool, thank you. Christopher Smith with $1.49 Canadian and some skyscrapers. Action Jackson with $5 says, have you heard of electism, the merging of Christianity with woke culture? Thoughts? Predictable? Definitely predictable. The Christians have long been adapting themselves to the left in probably the 70s and even earlier. And since then, you've seen certain churches, not all obviously, but certain churches kind of blending their cause with pro-communism. It's there. And sorry, okay, go on. I mean, you know much better than me as a historian of communism and stuff that many churches have aligned themselves with communists and stuff like that, and causes that were anti-American and anti-Western, anti-capitalist. So at the end of the day, I mean, these people are distant cousins, or not even distant, Christians and various types of leftists.
Actually, in a way, I don't want to mislead the audience. What I discuss in the book is the opposite in a way, how parts of Christianity were okay with the counterculture rather than the counterculture adopting Christianity. So in the 70s, you could hear the term, I'm high on Jesus. And you know what's the most interesting thing? Some of these people ended up in the silent majority that followed Reagan. So the idea is, so the counterculture had an influence both on the left, obviously, but also on parts of the right. And it's not a coincidence that this was the time when the religious sentiment was weakening. So that's where you hear people saying, oh, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual, for example. So you want to be a bit non-committant. But even people who were committant, let's say, to Christianity, they said, okay, yeah, but also I like this counterculture, I like this experimentation. So they would not feel confident enough to support their old mantras or the old way of the religion. And again, the peak is today with the Pope, not today, but some years ago with the Pope saying, who am I to judge the gay wedding? Which, again, I'm 200% in favor of the gay wedding. I'm against the narrative of the church related to gay wedding. But when you get the Pope saying, who am I to judge? You know you're onto something.
Yeah, I mean, when I was in high school, I played in a punk band, and we would do events like we were invited to play at a church type event. When this church event, it had a cool young pastor named Pastor Dan. He would give preach a sermon to the teenagers, the punky teenagers. And then he would say, all right, now we've got a band playing and skating. And then they'd be skateboarding around and a band playing. And I thought the whole thing was funny because I'm over there shouting lyrics about Satan and how evil religion is. They didn't give a shit. Like, what does the church care? I mean, this is a modern liberal, probably now woke BLM supporting church. Their goal is to adapt themselves to reach today's youth. I mean, and then this sort of question is ongoing in any kind of movement. Should the movement adapt itself to reach the youth and reach people in their values today, or should they remain firm? I mean, there's kind of an equivalent maybe debate among objectivists. Should objectivists be cool, or should they completely kind of be standoffish and just stick to romantic realism and like not go nowhere near any modern music or modern way of dress and language and stuff like that? But yeah, certainly the church adapts themselves. Certain churches adapt themselves, which I think shows you who's driving the car, like who's a force to be reckoned with in the culture, the left or Christianity. I mean, I think today you would have to say in a large portions of the culture, Christians are basically playing catch up. They're trying to, they're playing the Me Too game, not the hashtag Me Too, but yes, we can do it too. See, we're also woke. We're also part of BLM. BLM is driving the car. And yet the church is offering something that people do need and they are getting from the church. So it's kind of a reciprocal kind of relationship. Marilyn with $2 says, hey, you. Action Jackson with $2 says, what book is Nikos holding referring to there? I don't know. Maybe it's the book that Nikos just published today. Identity,
Politics,
it's a
book. Yeah, the book is called Identity, Politics, and Tribalism, the New Culture Wars. So it's the book I wrote about tribalism and about the culture wars. You can find on Amazon UK, 14 pounds paperback, 10 pounds Kindle. So it's the price of 2 Starbucks coffees, and it's worth hopefully more than that in terms of the knowledge which is inside. And yeah, just go to Amazon, put my name. You're going to see 2 books. The one is super expensive because it was with an academic publisher. Obviously, that money doesn't go in my pocket. It was my first book. And the one which looks like this is the new book. Again, you can buy it today. And we're going to have a whole daily objective on the book at some point, but not yet.
Yeah.
And also one thing, it's not an academic book. So you're going to have my prediction is that you're going to have a good time reading it. So it deals with ideas, hopefully from a point of view which is influenced by objectivism, but at the same time, anyone who watches this show, for example, could read it without any problem.
All right. Well, a lot more we could say about a lot of the stuff we've discussed here today. We've spurred quite a debate in the chat room. But speaking of chat, super chat, Phil with £5 says, the Queen has given NHS a George Cross. All right, I'll cut the accent. Is this an insult to the unnecessarily dead? And is further evidence required for a constitutional republic? I don't know what you said.
Do you think the Queen is the problem here? I mean, the NHS is a secular religion of this country, irrespective of the Queen. Again, the Queen is just playing catch up. Is how do I get moral relevance today? Oh, there's this apotheosis of the NHS. I'll jump on this, and the problem is not the Queen.
Yeah, I mean, I would be if the Pope gave the NHS a prize, which he would. That's more interesting. The Queen, isn't she just basically a figurehead? Well, she does represent something in England, doesn't she? She represents like tradition and establishment. And so for her to give a special prize across to the NHS, it does signify something. But
the NHS is part, remember, in the 2012 Olympics, on the opening ceremony, where the idea is who are we? There was a special segment on the NHS. Again, there's only one country in the world where they see their healthcare system like that, which is Cuba. Cuba and the UK are the only countries where supposedly their healthcare system is part of their national identity.
Anyway, we've spawned quite an argument in the chat room, which we will not get to today. You and Maria should do an episode about when 2 people are having 2 different conversations, like in a relationship, you're having an argument, you're having 2 separate conversations. So like maybe I would offer sometimes when I'm talking about how objectivists should see themselves in relation to the right, that doesn't mean, I'm not saying objectivists should never appear at their events, never share a stage with them, never talk to them, never discuss any shared common ground. But the point is, be clear on where you stand and where you disagree with. And I'm getting a lot of, so you're saying, But actually, the more I look at this chat room, the more I'm seeing apologizing for Trump's and acting like criticizing Trump is the problem, and objectivists should stop doing that, according to some people. So maybe we're having the same conversation and we just disagree. Maybe I should stop with this, what I'm saying right now, and just end the episode rather than opening this can of worms on my way out. Time to jump over to Clubhouse.
Oh, remember, 30 minutes from now, Yaron versus Frank on this channel.
Coming up in 29 minutes, Yaron versus Frank. This is the battle for Nikos' soul. His future depends on this debate. Whoever wins determines the outcome, the future of Nikos Sotirakopoulos. But they will be fighting not with fists, not with swords, but with ideas. Looking forward to that. See you back here in 29 minutes, and see you momentarily on Clubhouse. Thank you